So there's a pretty good news outlet called RT.com, stands for Russia Today, I think. Uh, they put out news in a lot of different languages, including English. I don't know if RT is an organ of the Russian government or not, but at least it provides a good alternative to most of the news sources that we have in the United States. It's probably better overall than any of our main websites, probably on par with the BBC, but a different angle. And so when I say better, what do I mean by that? RT is not owned, to my knowledge, by the same corporate interests that control the mainstream media in America. So RT is also going to report on different things. They're going to report on things that are of interest to Russian speakers. So Russian domestic politics, politics of the EU, Central Asia, things that our media isn't interested in or doesn't think that we're interested in. So basically places where the Wall Street bankers don't have as much of an interest. You can get a kick, you can get some entertainment out of reading RT just because things are so different. So one alternative is to watch funny cat videos that yahoo.com sends you to, or you can read about the really weird things that are going on in Russian domestic politics, and you can be entertained by either one. I would say pick the latter. You'll learn something. That'd be a lot better for you. What we're going to highlight specifically in this video is the Russian member of parliament Vladimir Zhirinovsky. So he's got his own political party called the Liberal Democratic Party of Russia. So this guy is really quite a character. He's got a complicated ethnic background. His father was a Jew named Wolf Edelstein, who I suppose left his mother and immigrated to Israel and started a new family and a new life there. Zhirinovsky himself identifies as a Russian by his ethnicity and as an Orthodox Christian by his religion. But later in his life, he reestablished some connections with his Jewish relatives living in Israel. So that's complicated. He also has a ton of controversial statements. This guy will basically say anything. There was an incident a few years ago in which he was at a press conference and a female journalist who happened to be pregnant, visibly so, was asking him some questions that he didn't like, and he suggested to some men in the room that maybe they rape her, beat her up, rape her, something like that. And she passed out and had to be taken to the hospital, and this caused, an international furor, I'm sure, and all the gossip rags probably reported on it too. I remember reading it, I think on Wikipedia, not too long after it had happened. So he says things like that, not infrequently, and says things as well like Japanese and Chinese should be deported from Russian East Asia because they don't belong there, they're the wrong ethnicity. So weird guy, complicated guy. Right now he's saying that they should rename Volgograd to Stalingrad because it was the site of the greatest battle of World War II and as a memory to the people who died in the battle. So that's pretty absurd. I don't think that would ever happen. He'll probably poll something like 15% if he's still alive in 2018 when they have the election. I hope that the idea of naming anything after Stalin is still taboo in the Soviet Union. I would hope so. I had read at one point that they were making kids read the Gulag Archipelago, Archipelago Gulag. I think they're still doing that. I hope they're still doing that. I suppose he's just trying to tap into that portion of the population that longs for the communist past, and I guess those would be people who were once prosperous civil servants but lost their jobs in the privatization and were unable to find new ones. The people who didn't, I guess that's his core base of supporters. Russian nationalists who aren't doing well in the new Russian economy. And there's some pretty wild comments on this story. If you scroll to the bottom, you can see people saying that Stalin was bad, but today's politicians are worse. Holy moly. And somebody saying that as bad as Stalin was, the czars were worse. Whew, man. That's pretty rough. I'd really like to see Jordan Peterson go after this issue and start to talk about modern Russia and what the conception of the really bad years are today. If they kind of gloss over it and put it in some general nationalistic idea and say, bad things had to happen because it was a tough era. We had to get through it. I think the two best things that I've read about it were the Gulag Archipelago, and then also a book called The Red Flag by David Priestland. Covers essentially the entire history of communism. A lot of good information in there about daily life for normal Russian people in various parts of the communist era. Anyhow, I'm rambling, so let's wrap this up. Russia Today, RT.com, good news source, entertaining, weird perspective on stuff that most Americans don't ever deal with, like this space cadet Vladimir Zhirinovsky and his kooky pro-Stalin ideas. So after I finished recording this audio piece on the article about Zhirinovsky and Stalingrad, I looked up RT on Wikipedia, and it seems to be quite a controversy about whether this news outlet is totally a propaganda arm of the Russian government. I guess if people are drawing a connection between its funding from the Russian government and whether it's 100% working for them, for the KGB or the FSB or something like that. PBS in the United States is funded quite substantially by the United States government, and nobody accuses PBS of being a propaganda arm for them. So I think just on the basis of the funding, it's probably unfair. I think a lot of this is probably just some more of that good old Cold Warrior, John McCain, Reds under the bed kind of stuff, where anything that comes out of Russia or that's involved with the Russian government has to be bad. But I think as long as you evaluate each of these stories independently, you would be much better off having RT in your arsenal as a place to get some of your news rather than just relying on some complete trash like the New York Times or Washington Post that quite often can't be trusted at all. I've been in contact with a reporter from one of those papers over factual errors and misleading statements in a story they published, and the reporter basically told me, look, guy, I'm operating under time constraints. Who gives a shit if my story isn't accurate? And my mind was blown, so I got in touch with the public editor who's supposed to deal with these issues of journalistic integrity, and they never got back with me. So if anybody's out there trashing something like RT, well, if they're going to trash it, they probably ought to be able to provide a good alternative. And since the Western papers of record are not that alternative, I think let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater and keep RT around.